Today, my guest is Mark Ferguson. He is a realtor. He's also an active flipper. We'll have to ask him how many homes he's flipped. I know it's a lot. He's also an author and a speaker and a podcaster, if that's not enough. His podcast is Invest for More. And he's also recently a commercial real estate investor. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mark to CREPN Radio. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and I'm excited.
Yeah, I am so looking forward to talk to you. I'm trying to think. I think it was almost a couple years ago we talked. I was on your podcast talking a little bit about insurance and stuff, but you are one active dude. I've been following you on Facebook and just all your podcasts and all that stuff. And but before we get into kind of the meat of the questions and all that stuff, if you could do the listeners and myself a favor and kind of expand a little bit on that introduction, the little bit I told the audience about.
Yeah. I got into real estate right after college. My dad was a real estate agent, and I worked part-time for him until I was going to find a real job, but that real job turned into real estate. And I was primarily an agent for many years, found kind of my niche in REO and foreclosure work for banks. And then I started buying residential property or residential rentals, started flipping a lot more houses, took over the whole team from my father, and then expanded everything. So yeah, right now I've got 22 active flips, which is a record for me. I think I've sold about 135 flips, around that number. I've bought 20 rentals, so 16 residential, 4 commercial. And then I've got a few agents on my real estate team who kind of sell for me. I'm not really an active agent at all anymore. And then, I've got my podcast and blog and all that stuff going on too. So it's fun, a little busy at times, but I've got a really good team too. So.
Well, and your books, how many books have you authored now?
I have 6 paperback books and then a couple other just ebooks. So yeah, those have been a lot of fun and done really well. So and 3 of them are audiobooks now too. So yeah, 6 books, a couple more ebooks. So those are a lot of work.
That's awesome. Do you read the books yourself for the audio, or do you have?
No.
No? Okay.
I tried it. I tried to read audio, and I got through like 2 pages. I'm like, I can't do this. It's going to drive me crazy. So I hired it out, and I was so happy I did that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, clearly you are, just full of experience, and I'm sure there's tons and tons of stories we could get into. In fact, I wanted to ask you. I think we were talking before. Originally, when you were starting out to grow your rental empire, the number that stands out was it 100 units? Was that kind of your goal?
Yeah, I wanted 100 rental properties by 2023, and I first wrote that in kind of 2013. So that was my 1-year plan, and I wrote out how many properties I'd buy each year and how I'd buy them and all this different stuff. And I was kind of planning on the market in Colorado where I'm at to be somewhat stable, maybe increase 3 to 5% a year. But what happened was prices from 2012 to now went from 110,000 to 290,000 for the median value in my town.
Wow.
So yeah. So instead of, I used to cash flow, $400 or $500 a month on each property, and now you can't cash flow at all because rents have not come close to keeping up with it. So I kind of had to change my strategy, either buy out of state or change the type of property I was buying. And for a while there, 1.5 years, I didn't buy any rentals while I kind of figured out what I was doing. And that's really when I ramped up my flipping, was because I focused on that instead of buying the rental properties.
Got it. Well, it's cool that you're able to shift gears like that and recognize, okay, this isn't working anymore, versus continue to buy them, then wonder why it's not working, kind of thing. Your numbers sound very familiar to what I see out here out in Portland. I know my original thought process always with rentals was the renter will pay down the principal. That was kind of my investment strategy, was that they were kind of investing, paying towards my 401k, because cash flow was not happening. It was not a thing. But, clearly if you can get cash flow, that's the goal. And since then I've gotten a couple of properties where they cash flowed right out of the gate, and it's a beautiful thing, when that happens. But well, that's cool. So you were doing the aggressive acquiring mode, flip to the flip, and now you said you got 22 going right now. Which what's your role in that? Are you actively out there finding them? Are you project managing? How are you? Do you have? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming 22. You got to have crews, right?
Yes. So I've got a really good team that helps me. My main goal or my main duties, I guess, are to find the deals. So, as an agent, I think that's a huge advantage. I still find more than half of my properties to flip on the MLS. We have a direct marketing campaign. I know quite a few wholesalers. We'll buy from auctions once in a while and networking. But yeah, my main asset I bring is finding those deals. And then I have a project manager, Nikki, who's actually worked with me for 7 years, I think now, who manages the contractors, manages the expenses. We go out and see the properties all the time and check up on everything. And then, my other main activity is the blog and podcasting. But we have 5 or 6 different contractors we work with. And then I have 3 full-time employees who are kind of handyman slash contractors who only work on my stuff. And then we use as many subs as we possibly can for electric, plumbing, roof, foundation, HVAC, carpet, paint. Just the more subs we have, kind of the cheaper and faster we can get things done if we're managing them correctly.
Right. Let me ask you just on your average. I mean, 22, that's a lot. What do you have any kind of a target turn time or an average that you're seeing from the day you get the keys to the day you're collecting the check on the sale?
My goal is 6 months. So because I have so many going at once, I can't have a contractor start the day I buy it. Usually, we're backed up a month or 2 before we can get started fixing it. Then it takes a month or 2 to fix it, and then hopefully a month or 2 to get it sold. And sometimes we go past that on the really big projects. Sometimes we sell them in 3 months on some of the easier projects. But usually the average is right around that 6 months.
Got it. Well, that's that's great. I mean, the fact you've got the systems and the timelines and the people, and I'm sure your contractors like you know that you're going to be keeping them busy. So you're probably a priority, I would think, based on the volume of work you got.
Most of the time, but
yeah.
That's always the biggest problem is getting good contractors and keeping them working hard. And a lot of times you'll find they'll give you reasonable prices and work real hard in the beginning, and then they'll get comfortable and lazy and start upping prices and being slower. And you've really got to keep on them. That's the biggest challenge for sure.
Gosh, dang it, they're human, huh? That's
I know.
Got it. All right. Well, since we I'm trying to think the last time we talked, but since the last time we talked, and my familiarity with your investing was all residential and flips. You've since bought 4 commercial properties, and I'm kind of curious. Can you share with us what your thoughts were on going towards the commercial?
Yeah. So, like I said, I bought my last residential rental in September of 2015, and I had some pretty strict guidelines I always bought single family homes that were, in probably B class neighborhoods. And the last rental I bought was kind of a C class home built in like 1910. It was way older than everything else I bought. And I looked at it, I'm like, I am really stretching my guidelines to get rentals to work. And I looked at everything, I'm like, I need to stick to my core investing, and I just can't do that right now. So I thought, I'll either invest out state, and that was my main goal. I went to Florida, checked out markets, talked to people all over the country, and was getting ready to invest in some out-of-state stuff when I just kept buying more and more flips. And I thought, well, if I'm buying these flips and doing well on those, I'm not sure I want to risk buying out of state when I've got to find a new agent, a new lender, a new contractor, a new property manager. So I'll just keep flipping for a while. And then a couple commercial properties kind of popped up out of the blue that were just super cheap. And I'm like, wow, I started looking at them and like, these numbers work so much better than residential. And then I ended up looking at some bigger commercial properties, value add propositions. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here to buy some properties that might be vacant or need some work, get a tenant in there, and increase the value and cash flow, kind of like you would a multifamily apartment building. Now, along the way, I've learned it's not quite as simple as that with commercial. There's a lot that goes into it, but some of my smaller commercial properties have done very well, and buying maybe $100,000, $110,000 properties, and we have one rented for $1,500, and another one I think we're going to rent here for $1,300 or $1,400 pretty soon.
Got it. Can you describe the different properties, what you've got?
Yeah, the first one I got under contract was a furniture restoration store. So it's kind of on a somewhat busy street, but not a super main thoroughfare. And the company had been there for 50 years. It's 1,300 square foot retail space in the front and like a 2,000 square foot shop space in the back. And it was built in like the 1920s and added on to, but in good shape. And that came up on the MLS for 110,000. I saw the price and 3,000 square feet and thought this was a great deal. So I made an offer right away, got it under contract. And it took 11 months to buy that property because there are IRS tax liens that the owner had to clear up. And it took that long to get real numbers right and everything with the IRS. So I actually just bought that last week. And he's renting it back for me for at least 6 months for the $1,500 a month now. So that one was interesting. That was the first one I got under contract and the last one I bought. And then I bought a small, just kind of warehouse space for my own business, storing my flip materials. And I've got a couple, I'm a car nut, so I've got a couple extra cars I can put in there and use for my own personal stuff. And then I bought a 7,500 square foot kind of office building that's 3,750 square feet on the main floor. And then it's actually got an unfinished basement that could be finished into more units. And that used to be a dentist's office and a doctor's office. So we're actually in the process of fixing that up just a little bit and trying to get it rented. And then I bought a little, 1,600 square foot cinder block building that's been used as a repair shop, canvas shop, a feed store for livestock. And we painted that, and that's one I bought for $101,000, actually, off Facebook Marketplace. That was the first. And hopefully that one will get here rented pretty soon for $1,300 to $1,500 in that range.
Got it. So it sounds like you're finding the opportunities. Have you created kind of a profile of what you're looking for, similar to what you were doing with the flips? Do you have kind of some?
No.
No?
Not really.
Okay.
It's kind of been as they come. That's what I've kind of just, looked for different opportunities, because with commercial, it's all about cap rates and square footage, and there's so many different things that go into it as far as the users, the zoning. So I think it's kind of hard to look for just one type of commercial place. We have, 100,000 people in my town, so there's not a ton of stuff coming up for sale. But I do have actually $2.1 million kind of 70,000 square foot building under contract right now that we just signed the papers on Friday. So that's going to be pretty exciting. I'm partnering with another investor here, and it's a grocery store, a restaurant, a coffee shop, and then 8,000 vacant office space. So that'll be an exciting one.
Wow. So, well, let's, if you don't mind, I mean, the smaller ones seem to me kind of very similar to like your residential, just based on the square footage. They seem very manageable. There's 4 walls. They sound like, well, I think you mentioned one of them had a dentist and a doctor's office, so maybe a multiple tenant building. But the others, it sounded like were primarily single occupant. Did I get that right? Okay.
2 of them, 3 of them are single occupant. The one, has 2 units now. Could be 1, it could be 3, it could be split up in a number of different ways. But the new one is definitely multi-tenant.
Gotcha. And I assume with the retail ones, they're located on some sort of there's a traffic pattern, there's opportunity for customers. If somebody were to, a business occupying that as opposed to being hidden off some back alley kind of thing. I mean, is that
yes.
Okay.
They're not, like I said, they're not main thoroughfares, but they're definitely busy streets where people will see them. And I saw, the price difference between being on a main thoroughfare and kind of, not off the beaten path, but just not on that main road is just huge around here. And I wasn't really looking for tenants who wanted to have that main thoroughfare, but more, people who wanted to operate an auto body shop or, something like that, or the furniture business where you've got retail, but it's not, prime location is going to cost you 4 times as much.
Gotcha. So when you buy these properties, it sounds like the furniture place still has the tenant, the seller is renting back from you. Is the shop one, the auto and feed and all that, is that one, is it occupied or is it for?
It is vacant.
Okay.
So I bought it vacant. That's why, that property with cap rates around here is probably worth $150,000 if it's rented, and I got it for $101,250. So, you get the discount for it being vacant, but we've already had 2 or 3 people ask about renting it before we even had a sign up on it. So we've definitely got some interest in it.
Got it. And as far as, like on a flip for a residential, you've got it down where you buy the property, you assess it, quickly what needs to be done, windows. I know the videos I've seen on your Facebook feed, it's pretty much, all right, we'll probably do this, and this, little kitchen, little bath, add a bath, add a bedroom, whatever. And you've got a kind of pretty good feel for it. With commercial, knowing that the space could be, a wide range of tenants, how do you assess that differently? Do you kind of predispose it to what kind of tenant will fit, or do you kind of spruce up the outside so you can make it look like an attractive building and then market it so you can attract a tenant? And then can you talk about that? Or
yeah, it's tricky. It's been a hard adjustment for me to get into commercial because I've had a commercial agent helping me because I wanted to get some extra help because it's so different. But, I see other places for lease and some of them are trashed. I mean, they haven't been maintained. And I see the reasoning why they do it because they think, a new tenant's going to come in, they're going to redo everything. We'll have to put tenant finish into it, tenant improvements. We don't want to spend any money now because we think the tenant's going to want to redo all of it. And I see that coming from the residential world, and I know how much emotions play into people renting and buying. And I'm just thinking to myself, if you just spruced it up a little bit, I think you would attract so many more tenants, even if, a lot of the big leasing companies probably can get past that and know, hey, we're going to finish this up. It's not a big deal. But if you're looking for smaller commercial businesses who are just starting out or, that I think that plays a role into what they're going to lease. So I have been trying to, spruce up the outside, maybe, clean up the inside, maybe even paint the inside, but not do major, changes, not upgrade the entire, space. Because like you said, you don't know who's going to be the user. You don't know exactly what they're going to want to do in there. So for like the small shop, it's a big open building with a bathroom and a little tiny office. So basically we painted the outside, painted the inside, and made sure the electrical is working right. And then, leave it at that. So yeah, it is tricky because I see some of the tenant finishes and TI improvements that other sellers have done and tenants want. And it blows my mind to the extent that some of it is going on.
Right. Well, and I think I guess the risk with commercial is just the vacancy, that it can sit vacant for a longer amount of time. But I think that, if you're finding properties that are, well situated, that have, whatever the size is that works. I mean, I've talked with other guys and they've said, like the depth of the space, there's like a certain size, and I forget what it was, but I'm saying like, from 6 to 1,600 square feet is ideal. If you go past it, for retail, and this has been a little while since I talked to him, but I remember there was some sort of like a zone that he recognized, this is the sweet spot, and I'm assuming that in your market and what you're going through, there's probably a learning curve and all that. But it seems like with your single properties that they've got kind of a Well, obviously the office is the office. The big open space can be, sounds like automotive is what it's been most recently. It's probably an ideal one. And as far as I know, cars are not going anywhere. Even if we go, even if we go all electric, whatever, there's still things that are going to need to be done or whatever. And but that's just, to me, it makes sense. I like the move into the commercial space. I'm assuming when these things are rented, do you have any kind of a progression or a kind of a number that you think they'll cap based on? I mean, do you think, what kind of cap rates are you seeing in your market for these types of spaces?
It goes all over the place. So the one really big one that we have under contract is at a 9 cap right now with its current income, and that is one of the best deals I have seen in a very long time. It's actually kind of a pocket listing from the agent I'm working with. So we've seen other big retail spaces, warehouses sell from 6 to 7 cap. Some of the smaller ones like this are probably, more like a 7 in that range for cap rates. The really solid, Wendy's with the 20-year leases are at a 5 cap right now around here. So it is, if you're trying to buy that property that's rented for 5, 10 years with solid tenants everywhere, they're very expensive. So that's kind of why I've been looking for the value add where I can put someone in, fix it up. And like you said, too, in our market, I actually for years wanted to buy a really big commercial place and kind of split it up into small shops, industrial for the HVAC guy, the plumber, the car guy, because there's almost nothing here vacant for small shop space like that. And I actually had a 280,000 square foot building under contract earlier this year I wanted to do that with, and it didn't work out with the repairs needed. It was an old Hewlett Packard warehouse, but it was a mess. But with the smaller stuff, it's kind of like, okay, I kind of buying that same small shop space, but just individually instead of taking a big one and splitting it up. So there is huge demand for those right now.
Oh, that's good. Good. Well, so the acquisition, you got that financing. How are you financing these?
It's been a mix. So I have a couple local banks who will do them. I did the little kind of car shop, we'll call it that, with a local bank. I think they did a 15-year fixed loan on it with 25% down, and it was right around 5%. I was going to do the same thing for the office space, but then in the end, I ended up doing private money. So I did private money on that one and private money on the other furniture store, where pretty much 100% financing, like 10% interest for a year. And my plan with those, since they're vacant, was to get them rented, get them leased, and then refinance them with a more traditional lender once they're rented, and we can show the value, the cap rates, and probably get just about all of my money back out of it and maybe a little bit more.
No, I like that. And that seems like a pretty reasonable. I mean, what I like about the commercial you're buying or that you've bought so far is they're manageable in size. Something that seems, and the town well, so it's not like you're jumping into a place you don't know. Have a sense for demand, like you said. There's no space really available for these type of folk. And it sounds like with the contractors you're putting to work on your flips, you might know a couple that might be possible tenants or whatever based on
Yeah.
the need there. So, and as far as the comparing the operating of a commercial space to operating your single family rentals, and in fact, do you manage all of your properties yourself, or do you have a management company? Or
I did until I had 7, and then actually agents in my team have managed them since then. So they've kind of been on my team, but I still pay them like I would a property management company. But I really am pretty hands-off on those, the residential properties. And with commercial, I mean, honestly, I haven't even had one rented for more than a month. So it's,
not a lot to manage.
Yeah. Right. But from what I've seen, from everything I've looked at, I mean, if you get the right tenant in there, it's much easier to manage than residential because they're taking care of the building. They're maintaining everything. They're paying all the utilities, and in some cases, they're paying the taxes and insurance, depending on your lease. So a lot of that you don't have to worry about. It's much easier to evict them. If they stop paying rent, you don't have to go through a lengthy court process. And so I think it's a lot easier to manage them. But like you said, the big risk there is if you have a property vacant for a really long time, obviously that eats into your cash flow.
Right, right. Well, interesting. So the new one you got in your contract, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So actually, the guy who lends me private money on some of my flips and these other rentals has been wanting to partner with me on a bigger deal for a long time. The commercial agent who I've been working with kind of brought this to me and wanted to show it to me first because he wanted to get both sides of it. And it's another thing in the commercial world is the agents are completely different than residential. So learning that side of the game has been different. But like I said, it's at a 9 cap right now. It's got a grocery store that's been in there for 30 years. Their rent's going up 3% a year with escalators. It's got a restaurant that spent $150,000 with the landlord and them chipping in to finish it. That's been around for a good 10 years total. Got another real small, office space in the back that's rented. And then a coffee shop that was actually built on a separate lot that's included in it, but kind of in the parking lot, a little drive-through coffee shop where they spent all the money building it and have a long-term 10-year lease with an option on it there. And then there's 8,000 square feet vacant in back where they've said they've had laundromat interested in it. They've had a cheerleading company interested in it, a few different things. So, but it makes money right now, which is nice. And
even with the 8,000 vacant,
yes,
right? Wow, that's
that
huge.
9 cap does not include any income from the back vacant spot. So if we can rent that, it's a huge win. And then I might even move my office into some of that space too. I've thought about. So no, it's a really interesting property. It's got 4.5 acres. That is on prime Main Street 4-lane, thoroughfare. So that is the prime location for real estate. And the property a mile away with similar setup sold at a 7% cap a couple months ago. So we're pretty excited about this one.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah,
that's great. And so I want to kind of go through this one. So the how you found it was your broker, which that's kind of what I've come to understand is once you essentially can prove to a broker that you're a buyer, you're on their list of, hey, let me show you this, kind of thing, which is awesome because you're going to get the opportunities, and the more I understand the commercial side of things, it makes sense. Is the MLS? While there's LoopNet and these other things and CoStar and that for commercial, at the end of the day, there's not as many buyers as there are on like the residential side, and just the whole concept of how the money works. It's actually a business. It's not a place to live kind of thing. So as you look at it and you understand the people involved, I get it more now, and just how critical these relationships are in order to get an opportunity, and essentially be ahead of the pack, kind of thing. And like you said, the listing broker is your broker, and he, like you said, he's getting both sides. So there's that much more of a reason for him to market it and find the buyer. So I'm trying to think. So on the, because up until this point, the ones you've bought, they sound like they're more definitely smaller. Were you finding those through a broker, or were you finding those direct from the seller? You mentioned like one was on Facebook. I don't remember where the others were found, but were they through brokers, or how were you? I
found those kind of myself. Okay. So I wasn't really super active in looking for them, but the first one was on the MLS. They listed it for 110, and I made an offer the same day, and the commercial agent couldn't believe he got an offer that fast. And I'm like, yeah, I want it. And I've learned too in commercial, it's the time frame for doing things is so different. In residential, I'm used to going so fast and getting things done quickly. In commercial, it's like 10 times slower for getting responses and closings, and everything has been really trying for my patience. But I found that one on MLS. The one was my contractor. Actually, I told my contractor, hey, if you find me any deals, we'll give you some bonuses. And the next day, he's like, hey, I just found this on Facebook. I'm like, oh, sweet. And the guy was asking $79,000 for it. And I think he said he had 18 showings the first day just from Facebook, and he had 8 offers. And I was really just throwing a dart with my offer price of 101,250. I figured that's still an awesome deal for me, and I thought it would get it, and it did. So I don't know if I paid way more than others, but he said it was really close. So who knows? And then the bigger one, the 7,500 square foot one, was on the MLS for months, and they dropped the price maybe 5 different times. And then I decided to take a look at it and made an even lower offer, which I bought that for $292, and I think they first had it listed for $500,000 in that price range. So,
wow.
yeah,
That's a significant discount there.
Yes, yeah. And then the little small shop I bought for myself for my own materials was actually a friend of mine who wanted to sell it, and he asked me to list it for him. I'm like, hey, this is exactly what I'm looking for. What do you want for it if we don't have any commissions or anything like that? And we came to an agreement, and that's how I bought that one.
Got it. So in this broker that showed you the larger one, the new property, you said is that the broker you've been consulting with on leasing up your properties, or I don't know about leasing, but it just consulting with?
Yes, I've been working with him for at least a year. We had the other big one under contract. I've looked at some other ones with him. I've consulted with him on leasing kind of the bigger property I have now. And then, he called me up, sent me this deal, said he has it listed. Although what he meant by having it listed is that he had a signed listing with the seller, but it wasn't actually marketed anywhere. So, there was no sign. It wasn't an MLS or LoopNet or anything. So he knew that I was looking for this type of property, the bigger properties where you can add some value. And after a couple of weeks of thinking about it and looking at it, we got under contract, and now we're in the due diligence process. So.
Got it. So on the new big property, the broker brings it to you. You said your private money lender has partnered with you to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And will you use traditional financing for this, or what's your?
Yeah, our plan is to use traditional financing on this one. So we've got 3 different banks who are interested in doing it around here, and looks like it's going to be about 25% down, around 5% on a 20-year amortization, and we're kind of shopping those banks against each other to see what kind of deal they can give us. So. But even with the financing, that loan, we're figuring it's making about $5,000 or $6,000 a month after all expenses and everything. And then once the rents increase, because the grocery store rent goes up $1,000 December 1st, so that's a nice bonus too.
Ka-ching!
I know, yeah, perfect. So it is rented really low rates. They've got the majority of the building, but they're only paying like $4 a square foot or something, which is really cheap around here. But they've been here forever, and they're a really solid tenant. And they take care of everything, including the parking lot. So, there's some sacrifices you make for low rent, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I just keep thinking about the 8,000 square feet that's out in the back. I mean, that seems like the sprinkles on top. I mean, you've got, that'd be huge. To get that
exactly.
Well, in the the interesting thing that I find is the news is full of how retail is dead, and I think that the broad category of retail is everything from a little retail shop all the way up to a shopping mall, and I think shopping malls are struggling in certain areas. I mean, the old traditional enclosed shopping mall. But I was talking with, I think it was John Crossman, was on the podcast here a few months ago, and he's a commercial broker down in Florida, and he was talking about how exactly kind of what you've bought is something with a grocery anchor and retail mix and restaurant. These are, as long as you've got a community that's, and I forget the exact size, but there was some sort of a magic number of occupants in a community, and the distance and all this, and that these are, exactly what you want, because they're just groceries are groceries. I mean, you can Amazon Prime everything, but fresh food is still fresh food, right? And people got to eat, and even with like the mall situation where people may not go to the mall to buy shoes and jeans and all the stuff they used to do, they're still going for the experience. And the experience, even at a grocery store, they get to go see the neighbors, or there's relationships there, and there's just opportunities for those kind of the more the service related things that are or tenants in those types of buildings. And if there's already a magnet of people coming to the grocery store, then there's an opportunity for these other related, or not related, but other businesses that can, traffic, or, benefit from the traffic and stuff. So I would think that's huge. I mean, 8,000 square feet, I don't know, hardware stores. I mean, it just, my mind buzzes like, wow, who could we get in there?
I know.
That's awesome.
That space is definitely, it's a mess right now. It's been for lease forever, but you walk into it and the ceiling tiles have fallen down and there's past roof leaks that have been fixed now, but it still looks like, it's a mess, and the carpet's old and dingy. And I just think if you just cleaned it up a little bit, it'd be so much easier to rent. But,
showed just a little bit better than the falling tiles. And
exactly.
Exactly. So, all right, so the broker shows it to you. You got the financing. You're in the due diligence period. You've got the vacant space. Would you manage this? Would your broker, or do you have somebody picked out to manage this, or would you manage it yourself, or how would you?
Right now they have a real estate agent company that's managing it for them, and they're charging them it's really low. It's I'd have to look at the numbers, but we're going to try and keep them and use them if they're still willing to do it. If not, we would probably find someone to manage it. My broker I work with does not do property management. He does leasing, but he does not do the actual management. So we're hoping this company will keep leasing it. I think they will, or managing it for us. And if not, I don't really want to spend my time managing commercial place. So if there's the small ones, one user, that's one thing where it's pretty simple. But these bigger ones where I don't know, HVAC guys, or, I don't have all the connections I do on the big ones that I do on the smaller residential or smaller commercial buildings. I think I'd use management for them.
Right. No, it makes sense. Well, that's exciting. Do you have some sort of a timeline you expect to close on this, or?
End of January. So we've got 45 days for inspection, and then 75 days for closing. And like I said, we just signed it Friday. So we've got the lenders kind of working on it now, and then we're going to do some inspections on it. And I mean, everything looks to be in decent shape. I don't think there'll be any surprises there, but we just want to make sure the roof is good, obviously, and the HVAC systems and electrical and all that. But so hopefully start of next year, be kind of like buying 5 rental properties when you split it in half.
No, that's awesome. Let me ask you, because on my experience with single family has been when I was buying them for rentals originally, I wasn't accounting for all the numbers like I do now. It was more of like, well, God, that'll cover the rent and the insurance and taxes. What could go wrong, right? And along the way, I've kind of learned, well, you should probably account for vacancies and breakdowns and whatever else, repairs and et cetera. Going through this, are you guys analyzing this more with capital expenses, et cetera, in mind, or how are you assessing the operating cost, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten all their financials for the last couple of years, so we could kind of see exactly what they spent money on, their management costs, taxes, insurance, all of that. So we've kind of been basing our numbers off their historic
actual numbers.
Yeah. But then also we're, thinking, okay, the parking lot that is not with the grocery store is our responsibility. So if that needs done, how much is that going to be? How much do we need to budget for that? If we have to put tenant finish into any of the back space, how much is that going to be? So yeah, we are looking at the actual numbers they spent, But then as well, if any big numbers come up, like a roof or parking lot, that's going to really, bump up those expenses, because for the most part, they haven't had too many issues up to this point. So yeah, no, like you said, you've got to, take into account the vacancies, the maintenance. And right now, the vacant space in back we're not even accounting that into the income at all. That's just a bonus. So
Right.
that'd be great.
No, that's great. And what's the seller's position in this? Are they, why are they selling?
Well, according to the broker, they're in Texas and they have a number of properties across the country, and they want to sell everything that's outside of Texas. That's what he told us. They said they want to simplify their taxes and just sell everything that's not in their core market. So again, he's representing them and us. So I don't know, what all their motivations are, but that's what he told us.
Well, you got a willing seller. That's the first thing. So that's good.
Yep.
But, well, this has been great. Let me ask you this. Is there one thing that you could share with the listeners who are maybe they're in the residential space, whether they're doing single families or they're doing flips? Is there one thing that you could say to them if they're thinking about going into commercial that you would encourage them to say, make sure you do?
Yes. So when I first got into it, I kind of jumped in with both feet, not knowing what I was doing, said, hey, that looks like a good deal, I'll just buy it. But I think what you really have to learn is what it takes to get a place leased. Because one thing I didn't realize with some of these bigger properties and other ones was the amount of tenant finish that some of the owners will pay to help the tenants move in, whether, it's fixing up the restaurant. I think they spend $150,000 getting that place ready for the restaurant. And that was, some of the seller paying it, some of the tenant paying it. Seeing those costs and seeing that maybe on some of these deals, when the owner does allow tenant finish, they might bump the rent up to cover it for a few years. And then the tenant might expect that rent to bump back down after they've kind of paid for that. So the big surprise for me was the tenant finish, how much is spent, what goes into it. And then, of course, like you said earlier, the vacancies. You have to be, prepared for it to take a while to rent some of these spaces. It's not like residential where, you have an open house and you have 5 people who want to rent it if it's priced right. It takes a little bit more, and it's a lot longer process to get them rented.
No, that makes sense. And I'm like you said, it's definitely different, and it can be a shock to your system if you're not prepared for it, and or at least even mentally prepared for it. Like you said, if you're not thinking in that mind frame of, okay, it could take a few months here, you're thinking like, why isn't this thing rented? I got it.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, hey, before we wrap up, what's the best way for our listeners to find you and learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, so my blog, investformore.com, which is invest in the number 4 spelled out, FOURMORE.com, talks about everything I'm doing. I have like 450 some articles about flipping, rentals, commercial, agents, all that. I do a weekly podcast, as you said, which we go over, interviewing people like yourself, or when I'm just talking about my own stuff. And I have videos and numbers on all my rentals, just about all my flips. So got all that on the site as well. And if anybody wants to email me, it's mark@investformore.com. And I'm happy to hear from people and help any way I can.
Before I wrap this up, I just want to stress the Invest For, FOUR. Can you tell the listeners what the background for that?
Yeah, so when I first started my blog, I have 8 rentals or something. And when I hit 4 and got 4 mortgages in my name, none of the big banks want to lend to me anymore. And I think a lot of people in that same space thought you couldn't actually get more than 4 mortgages, whereas actually just the big banks don't want to lend to people with more than 4 loans. So I found local banks. There are some other bigger banks that'll do it. And so the blog was built around getting financing for rental properties and how to get more than 4 loans. And that's where the Invest for More comes from.
Got it. I love that. So, all right. Well, hey, Mark, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing what you're doing. It's been fun to catch up and hear about what you're doing.
No, great to be on the show. I appreciate it. Had a lot of fun, and yeah, we'll definitely have to keep in touch.
Now you got it. All right. And for our listeners, if you like the show, share the show with someone you know. It's easy to do. Use the share button on your podcast player, and you can share Mark's story and how he's gone from single-family flips, rentals, and now into commercial to grow his portfolio. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.